A soldier came home and found his German shepherd starving in his backyard. What he did next inspired millions. The bus hissed as it pulled away, leaving behind a cloud of dust and the silhouette of a man standing still, duffel bag slung over his shoulder. James Carter, Army sergeant and recently returned from a 15-month tour in Afghanistan, stood at the edge of his small Texas hometown, staring down a cracked sidewalk that led to a house full of memories. The wind was sharp, colder than he remembered. Trees stood bare under a gray sky as dusk settled over the neighborhood. Everything looked smaller now, quieter. As he walked, the sounds of war still echoed in his head. Gunfire, shouted commands, and the eerie silence that followed explosions. The weight of memory was heavier than the gear he carried. He reached the old wooden gate to his childhood home. The paint had peeled, the hinges rusted. The lawn was wild with weeds and the porch light was off. His heart skipped. "Mom? Dad?" he called out, voice tight with uncertainty. No answer. Inside, the house was hollow. Furniture stood covered in dust. The kitchen was stripped bare. The air was stale with abandonment. James set down his bag slowly, his stomach sinking. Something was wrong. Then a sound, soft and broken, a weak whimper. He followed it through the creaky back door and into the overgrown yard. Near a collapsed kennel, beneath a leaf-covered tarp, lay a German shepherd. The dog was curled into himself, ribs visible, fur matted and falling out. One leg was twisted unnaturally, his once proud frame now fragile. His eyes, though cloudy, flickered with something, recognition. James dropped to his knees. "Rex?" His voice cracked. The rusted tag on the tattered collar confirmed it. Rex, the pup he had raised before deployment, the one he'd promised to come back for. Tears stung James's eyes. He reached out with trembling hands. "You waited all this time?" Rex gave the faintest wag of his tail and nudged his snout into James's palm. Despite everything he remembered, he still trusted. James scooped him up, barely noticing the dirt and stink, only the rapid heartbeat against his chest. The dog was skin and bones, and yet he pressed himself close, still loyal. James didn't waste a second. Holding Rex tightly, he sprinted down the dark street, dialing the nearest emergency vet with one hand, his voice frantic. "I need help. He's starving. He's dying." That night, the world shrunk to one mission, saving the dog who had never given up on him. He had faced war zones, but nothing had prepared him for this battlefield of heartbreak in his own backyard. James didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight he was going to fight for Rex like Rex had waited for him. And so began a story that would inspire millions. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled James Carter's lungs as he paced the cold, white-tiled floor of the emergency veterinary clinic. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting pale shadows. In the exam room behind him, Rex, his once vibrant German shepherd, lay unconscious, hooked to IVs and wrapped in gauze. The vet, a gray-haired woman with tired eyes named Doctor. Elena Morris stepped out and looked at him with the quiet calm of someone who had delivered bad news too many times. "He's in bad shape," she said gently. "Severely malnourished, dehydrated. There's a nasty infection in that leg. If we don't operate, it could spread. But even with surgery, he might not make it through the night." James's stomach twisted. "How much?" he asked. Dr. Morris hesitated. "With the surgery, meds, and round-the-clock care, it could run into the thousands." James pulled out his wallet, fingers trembling. Inside was a slip of folded paper, his savings account withdrawal. The money he'd set aside for a truck, maybe even a down payment on a small place of his own. A fresh start. He didn't blink. Do whatever it takes. He signed the papers with the same resolve he'd used signing enlistment forms years ago. Rex wasn't just a dog. He was family. He was the only piece of James's past that hadn't vanished. While the surgery began, James went back to the house. The silence inside was unbearable. He scrubbed the dust from the floors and aired out the rooms. He cleaned out the kitchen and cooked a pot of beef and rice, something he remembered Rex loving as a pup. The place still looked empty, but it felt like it was waiting for someone again. Hours later, he got the call. "He made it," Dr. Morris said, surprised. "He's a fighter." When James arrived, Rex was lying still, wrapped in white bandages, a plastic cone around his neck. His breathing was slow but steady. One eye fluttered open when James approached, and his tail thumped weakly against the blanket. James smiled through tears and leaned down to whisper, "I told you we'd get through this." He carried Rex home like a soldier carries a fallen comrade, with care, with reverence. Inside, he laid him gently on a soft blanket in the living room. He set down a bowl of fresh water and placed a warm compress near his leg. Every day after that was a battle. James woke up early to feed Rex small portions by hand. He cleaned his wounds, gave him medicine, and whispered words of encouragement. "You're not alone anymore, buddy." At night, he lay beside him, afraid to let go. And slowly, Rex began to respond. He lifted his head. He drank water on his own. His ears twitched at James's voice. Then one morning, against all odds, he stood. James dropped to his knees, tears falling freely. "You did it, boy." They were healing together, one scar at a time. The house was quiet, but James Carter's mind was not. He had survived 15 months in Afghanistan, but sometimes he wondered if part of him had never come home. The images that haunted him were relentless. His friend's final breath, the blinding flash of an IED, the bone-deep silence that always followed an explosion. At night, those memories sharpened like broken glass. One evening, after tucking Rex in on the soft blanket by the fireplace, James tried to rest. He lay on the living room couch, but sleep came in short bursts, jagged and tense. Then came the nightmare. He was back in the convoy, dust choking his lungs, adrenaline burning through his veins. The ambush started without warning. Gunfire, shouting, blood. James reached for a rifle that wasn't there. His heart pounded as he saw the lifeless faces of men he couldn't save. He jolted awake, gasping, drenched in sweat. The room was dark, lit only by the flicker of dying embers in the fireplace. His breath came in sharp bursts. His hands shook uncontrollably. He pressed them to his face, trying to ground himself, to remind himself he wasn't there anymore. But panic clawed at his chest. Then he felt it, a warm weight on his legs. James looked down. Rex, weak and still recovering, had dragged himself off his blanket and now rested his head gently on James's thigh. His eyes were tired but soft, as if to say, "I'm here. I've got you." James stared at the dog through blurred vision. "You came for me again," he whispered, his voice cracking. He reached down and stroked Rex's patchy fur, the familiar feel anchoring him. The tremors in his hands slowed. His breathing eased. And for the first time in months, the storm inside him began to quiet. That night, James fell asleep with his hand resting on Rex's head, his body curled slightly around the dog's. The nightmare didn't return. It became a ritual. Every time the darkness crept in, Rex was there. Even in his frail state, the dog seemed to sense James's pain. When James tossed and turned, Rex would limp closer, rest his head near James's chest, or nudge his hand with his nose. He became the shield between James and the ghosts of war. James often woke to find Rex already watching him, eyes half closed, ears alert. "You're still protecting me," James murmured one morning, brushing a hand over Rex's ears. Even now, the bond between them deepened in that quiet struggle. Neither spoke the language of healing, but both understood pain. Both bore invisible wounds. But every shared sunrise, every peaceful night, stitched them closer together. They were not the same soldier and pup they had once been. They were something stronger, two broken souls helping each other mend, one breath at a time. And for the first time since returning home, James believed that peace might be possible, not just for Rex, but for himself. Spring had returned to the Texas countryside, painting the trees in new leaves and warming the wind. For James Carter and Rex, it marked nearly 6 months since that cold homecoming day. 6 months of slow healing, quiet walks, and learning to trust the world again. Rex was no longer a bag of bones. His fur had grown in soft and golden, though scars still peeked through in places. His injured leg remained stiff, but he could walk now, even jog a little. His eyes had regained their brightness, and every wag of his tail carried more strength. That morning, James leashed Rex and walked to the local park. It was a small, grassy area with a swing set, benches, and a playground where parents chatted and children laughed. James preferred the edges, near the old oak trees where it was quiet. He sat on a bench with Rex at his feet, a travel mug of coffee in one hand. For a few minutes, the world felt almost normal. He was just a guy with his dog in the park, the sun on his shoulders, and peace in his chest. Then a scream shattered the stillness. James looked up and saw a young girl, maybe 5 or 6, standing frozen near the slide. A pit bull, unleashed and wild-eyed, charged toward her, barking and snarling. The girl couldn't move. She just cried out, frozen in fear. Before James could rise, Rex was already moving. With no hesitation, the German Shepherd broke into a run. His legs wobbled, but his instincts surged ahead. He barreled across the grass, leaping between the child and the attacking dog. The impact was brutal. The pit bull lunged, teeth sinking into Rex's shoulder. But Rex didn't back down. He growled, snapped, and held his ground. Fur flew, blood darkened the grass. The little girl's mother screamed as people rushed over. James sprinted into the chaos, heart hammering. He grabbed the pit bull's collar and yanked it away with all the strength he had, finally pulling it off. Someone called animal control. Others gathered around the girl, shaken but unharmed. James dropped to his knees beside Rex. His dog lay bleeding, his chest heaving. His jaw was clenched in pain, but when he saw James, his tail thumped once against the ground. "You did it," James whispered, voice cracking. "You saved her." The paramedics checked the girl while James wrapped Rex's wounds in his flannel overshirt. A man offered to drive them to the emergency vet. James didn't let go of Rex the entire way. At the clinic, as the vet worked, James paced the waiting room, fists clenched, replaying every second in his head. He couldn't lose him again, not after everything. Hours later, the vet came out. "He's going to make it. He's one tough dog." James sat down hard, head in his hands. Relief crashed over him. Rex had saved a life, and once again he had reminded James of his own. The video was only 27 seconds long. It began with a child's scream, followed by the flash of fur as Rex, a battered but brave German Shepherd, lunged into action. In grainy cell phone footage, Rex fought off a charging pit bull to protect a little girl in the park. The clip ended with James Carter, still in his army boots and a weathered brown jacket, cradling Rex in his arms, blood staining both their clothes. By the next morning, the video had been shared over 2 million times. News stations picked it up. Headlines blared, "Veteran's dog saves child in daring rescue." From war zone to hero, the story of Rex the Miracle Shepherd. A second chance, how a starving dog became a national symbol of loyalty. James didn't seek fame. He barely even checked his phone. He spent most of his time at the vet's office, sleeping in a chair beside Rex's recovery crate. The dog had deep puncture wounds and required stitches, pain meds, and IV fluids. But he made it, and so did the little girl. Her name was Emily Rivera, and her family came by a week later to say thank you. The girl clutched a drawing in her tiny hands. Stick figures of her, James, and Rex, all smiling under a blue sky. She had drawn a gold medal around Rex's neck. "Thank you for saving me," she whispered, hugging the dog gently. James blinked back tears. A few days later, a producer from the American Hero Dog Awards called. "We saw what your dog did," she said. "We want to honor him." James didn't feel like a hero, neither did Rex, but they agreed. At the awards ceremony in Los Angeles, James stood on stage in a tailored suit, his army medals pinned to the lapel. Rex wore a sleek black service vest and walked with a proud limp by his side. The crowd stood and applauded as they approached the microphone. James cleared his throat. His voice trembled. "I came home broken," he said, "and so did he. But he never stopped fighting. Even when everyone forgot him, even when he was starving, he waited for me." He looked down at Rex, who sat obediently at his feet, tail gently wagging. Then he went and saved someone else. That's what loyalty is. It's not loud. It's not flashy. It waits. It protects. It forgives. The crowd rose to their feet again, clapping and cheering. Afterward, people lined up to meet Rex. Kids hugged him. Soldiers saluted. Journalists asked James how they'd made it through. "We saved each other," he replied. That night back in Texas, James and Rex sat together on the old wooden porch. The sun dipped below the horizon, turning the sky a soft pink. Rex laid his head on James' boot and sighed. They didn't need applause or awards. They just needed each other.